3-5 in an interesting bit of trivia is the last, you could argue, it's the last trig lesson I'll teach you. I'm not retiring or anything. I don't have a terminal disease. But the year is about to transition away from trig. We'll still be in the blue book for a couple more chapters, but sine, cosine, tangent are about to fade from your life, to return in calculus if you take it, or in physics every once in a while they come up. But sine, cosine, tangent, triangles, that kind of thing is about to stop. So your book is covered, so you probably haven't looked at it for a long time, but it says pre-calculus with trigonometry. So when we wrap up this chapter 3, we'll continue to learn things, but it's more things that you might call pre-calculus. You might call it algebra 3. You might call it, I don't know what you might call it, something else. But we're transitioning. So 3-5 is the end of what we learned in chapter 3. Coming up on our horizon would be a homework day tomorrow where I answer questions, a homework day the next day where I answer questions, a sheet due Friday that I already gave you that will come around by then, next week a test, and then we're going to take a trig final like now-ish, like February-ish. We'll put the chapters we've done so far together and take a final on trig. When we get to June, there would be on the final exam day like a test, but it'll be like a chapter test on whatever chapter we end up with last. But this stops building at this point. So I'm not going to make you wait till June to take tests on Oscar and his EPA apples. Like, we need to just do that now. So that's coming soon-ish. We'll do some reviews and some finals. But anyway, 3-5 is it. So if you've enjoyed trig, say farewell. If you haven't enjoyed trig, you're glad to get rid of it. And then the year kind of transitions to some more algebra-ish kinds of things. So today's list of properties are called half angles. So what we're having here is halves in the arguments. So the cosine of half of an angle could be positive or negative. There's just ways we'll have to decide that sometimes. Square root half 1 plus cosine x. Bad news is that is kind of messy looking to memorize. The good news is if you can get that one memorized, the rest of them just follow suit. So if I want to trade cosine for sine, if you've memorized this successfully, you just have to get the sign switched. And there's the danger of getting them crossed, I guess. But just find some memory trick to know cosine's going to have the plus, so sine doesn't. If you get those straight, then tan falls into place. How have we always been able to make tan stuff? Sine on top of cosine. So if you take the sine answer to the top and the cosine answer to the bottom, if you got those right, you'll get tan right. If you got those wrong, you'll get tan wrong. The halves disappear because if you divide a half by the other half, the halves would basically eliminate each other. So a half in the base 2, but not in this one. You're probably looking at that thinking, that's a lot of messy Rudy fractions, and somebody in the trig world thought that too and agreed with you, and they figured out ways to get rid of the roots and fix them. So if you get rid of the root and fix it, the plus minus is going to vanish. The top can stay put, or the bottom could stay put, and just fill sine in the other half. That's going to be a change around. I could probably explain to you why that can be justified, but you probably wouldn't care, and I just don't want to. And, if we have this one to work from, there's ways that those could be created, but we could keep the bottom the same, make sine on top, or keep the top the same, make sine on the bottom. But that's our list to just get familiar with, and that completes our collection of properties for chapter 3. Question there? Okay, then the homework's about like how it always is, but you catch a break today. Every day we've done 3-3, 3-4, 3-5 now in a row. Every section, the first bit of homework has expected you to draw an Oscar has a heap of apples picture and then fill in properties. Today is going to be better news. The only property, the only fact you need is cosine. If you have a cosine fact, you're able to just do these. And in the homework, they're going to give you a cosine fact. So if they say cosine is 4/5, and they want you to find cosine half x, the only thing you're going to have to do is decide on the sign. And that's what this is for. We'll get back to that in a second. But we go root half 1 plus, for this property, 4/5. And then try to math it. Anybody not sure how I just made that first jump? What do you think for mathing it? Suggestion to make that better? It doesn't involve the root. What do you always do first? No, I wouldn't distribute that. Yeah, we're just thinking like order of operations stuff. These little parentheses always go first. So do the parentheses, add that. So we have a half is going to multiply. We need to add that up. Nine fifths would be best. 1's the same as 5/5. Add that on. 9/5 is good. Now what do you think? Multiply. So 9/10. Now we can deal with the roots. When we have roots of fractions, just do each piece separately. On top, root of 9 is better. Root of 9 is 3. On the bottom, root of 10 is, for a second, just root of 10. Let's improve that. 3 root 10 over 10 is ideal. Question about that process. Okay, then let's talk about this. They're telling us this 270, 360 thing so that we know basically where the original angle is in this world, which we don't necessarily care super a lot about where the original angle was. What we care about is if we cut these numbers in half, where do we live? So we're going to have to do half of this number, 35, do half of this number, 180, and figure out where that lives now. If we're between 135 and 180, where do we live? S. So this was 0. This is 90. That's 180, 270, back to 360. The original angle lived there, but no one cares. The half angle lives in here, which means that a cosine answer should be 9. Question about that. Then I'm just going to recycle my space to do sine. Does anybody need a sec before I start making little changes to copy? If I go sine, what's the only difference in what we're going to do? Minus. So that isn't 9/5. It's 1/5. So this isn't 9/10. It's 1/10. This is not a 3. It'll be a 1. And then when we fix it, I don't need to write the 1 there. It'll be root 10 on top of 10. Positive or negative, though? Positive. because we're in Sine's quadrant and we just did a sine problem. Question about that? Tan, I would never use the tan property. We've never used the tan properties for anything. How have we done almost all the tan answers to this point? Yeah, to do tan, we want sine to divide cosine. So sine is still showing on the board root 10 over 10. Cosine I erased, but it was negative 3 root 10 over 10, correct? That's what I erased. So for sine's fraction that's still here to divide cosine's fraction we had a second ago, how do you divide fractions? Flip the second one. So if this flips, what are we able to cancel? Root 10s are gone. 10s are gone. So what we would have is a 1 on top of a negative 3. That would be tan's answer. Question about that? So there's a bunch of those. I think you don't have to draw any pictures. Let me double check. We're working page 92 today. Yeah, the first bit of homework goes from 13 to 18. They always give you cosine, so a picture is not necessary. What is necessary is to take the angle measurements they give you and cut them all in half to see where you live, because that's going to determine the positive or negativeness of it. That should work out okay. Question about that type. And the second type of homework is the second type we do every day, which is some equation solving. So take a turn, guesstimate. Am I on screen when I try to do this area now? Is that about right? Yeah. Okay, so if we go to solve equations, how have we solved all the equations in all the sections? What's the first thing we've got to recognize? What property it is. So we check this out, we look over there, that is which of the properties? Cosine. Half theta. I sneaked a negative in on this one just to make it maximum difficulty. Root 2 over 2. After we've got our property, we get rid of the trigginess of it. How do we get rid of the trigginess of it? We do an inverse, which for this kind of a thing, we're thinking inverse, we have to consult our chart. Root 2 over 2 on your chart is 45. Then we deal with the fact I sneaked the negative in. 180 minus 45, that's 135. And then we create a general formula around that. How do we do a cosine general formula? It is a plus minus 360K. Question about the middle. There's a lot of action through that middle, but it's always inverse, which leads you to your chart, which may make you consider the negative if I sneaked one in, and then general formula. And there's always an algebra move. We've added, subtracted, multiplied, divided, all different sorts of things. If we're going to get rid of the half, how do we get rid of the half? Divide by. I could agree with divide. Yeah, we're dividing by a half, which is really the same as multiplying by 2 is probably a simpler way to think of it, but both correct. To get rid of a half, divide by a half, dividing fractions flips them. So multiply by 2 is going to take us for the win. If we multiply by 2, we're going to multiply everything by 2. The first day for adding and subtracting, we were worried about like terms for adding and subtracting, and the K was a little bit of a problem. We couldn't touch it. But if you're going to multiply, you can multiply anything. It doesn't matter if it's like or unlike. Just multiply everything by 2. So that's the second section of homework, like there has been every day. That takes us to 24. And then I'm not necessarily going to do an example from the third group. The third group, they're all different anyway. The third group is what the third group always is. You pick one side and you turn it into the other side. And you just, whatever happens, happens. So that's pretty much a wrap on that. So tomorrow what we would be targeting as what to do would be 13 to 24. The next day would be more of an emphasis on the 25 to 32s. And then the following day we're into the worksheets and go from there. Question about what's up with any of this?